Welcome to Screening Room. I'm Robert Gardner. Woodrow Wilson, probably as a historian, not our president, once said about Griffiths that he was an historian with light. He was speaking about A Birth of a Nation. Dwight MacDonald once said that Emile de Antonio is an historian with a moviola. For those of you who don't know what a moviola is, it's the quintessential instrument for editing film. And for those of you who don't know who Emile de Antonio is, he's on my left here. My other guest is an old friend and a fellow worker in the vineyards of film, actuality, and the human spirit, Ted Carpenter. D, usually I start these things by asking who my guest is, so everybody else knows. Who are you?
Well, I'm Emile de Antonio, and I make films, and I tend to define my life in those terms. I spent a long life before making films doing nothing, being rather splendidly idle, and you can give no definition of that. But I've spent the last 13 years working very hard making documentary films.
Tremendously hard and making tremendously good films. Your first film was Point of Order, which we've just seen 44 seconds. How did you get the idea to make Point of Order?
Partly out of desperation. I wanted to go into film, partly out of working with Dan Talbot, who needed film to put into his theater. And because
this is the New Yorker
New Yorker Theater in New York, and because he had just opened a theater, he had a tremendous problem getting what is called in Hollywood product. And we both thought of trying to get something out of television. It was his idea to take a segment of the Army McCarthy hearings, which we both felt was the most exciting thing that ever had happened on television, and put it into his theater. But then I never did like that idea. I said, it's such an extraordinary idea. Why don't we make a film?
What year is this?
This is 1960.
The hearings?
The hearings took place in 1954, and the initial discussion of the idea was 1960.
Mm-hmm. And that hearing had stayed with you vividly all that time?
Well, as I say, I didn't do very much until I started working. I'm one of the few people in America who heard the entire hearings. I just stayed at home with an innumerable supply of beer cans and looked at the hearings.
Well, Ted, you must have looked at the hearings too, didn't you?
With, I think the whole nation did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really the first TV.
I suspect that there are an awful lot of people watching who were not born much before 1954. It's very hard to impart the feeling that we all had.
Do you know how many
time.
people watched it? 20 million people every day watched it. When this is 1954, which is a lot, 20 million, an audience of 20 million today is not so staggering. But when you think of it in its proper terms, it's roughly the population of the United States at the time of the Civil War, the entire population of the United States. That's the number of people who looked at it every day for 36 days. And I think it's the most extraordinary document that's ever been made. Not my film, but I mean, that's ever been put on television.
Did you see the whole repeat of the hearing? I mean,
there was never a repeat.
No. I mean, did you get the Kinney?
I bought the 188 hours and screened it twice, which took a whole summer. But the thing that's important to me about the raw material is that it's the fall of a demagogue. When those hearings began, April 16th, 1954, Mr. McCarthy was almost a government unto himself, separate but equal to the Eisenhower administration, marauding wherever he felt like it, investigating whomever he felt like investigating. And when those hearings were finished, he was finished. He had no power left in the Senate. His investigations became perfunctory and cursory.
In fact, the last scene of the film.
The last scene of the film, which is, of course, made up, because I think that it's one of the duties of a documentarian to improve on the truth. That's the way you arrive at the truth.
We may get into a discussion of how you improve on the truth, but I'll take you at your word at this moment that it is an improvement.